Hi guys, it's Grace. Spring is almost here and this warm cabbage salad is spring on a plate. I'm telling you, I finely shave red cabbage, this beautiful, beautiful cabbage here, and then I toss it in a warm vinaigrette and then put some crunchy onions on the top that we're going to be making homemade crunchy fried onions. How good does that sound? I can't wait to show you guys this recipe. It's so colorful and fun and vibrant, and it just makes me so happy, especially now that the weather is warmer. So we're gonna be making homemade crunchy fried onions today. Yum! And it starts with onions. I have some very, very tiny onions. When I went to the grocery store, they only had really tiny ones. It's very odd. We're going to cut some yellow onions in half, just like this. I would recommend using about one medium yellow onion or two very, very small ones. And then I'm gonna take a mandolin, which looks like this. This is basically something that will just thinly shave vegetables or cheese or whatever. It thinly shaves things. And I'm going to thinly shave this onion. And you can also use just a really sharp knife and do this by hand. Not a problem, but this is just so much easier. And when you get to the bitter end, you can use it, or you can just set it aside and use it in something else. So we're gonna go ahead and do this for all of our onion halves. Alrighty, I'm putting all my thinly sliced onions in a ball here. Look at how perfect they are. This is why you need a mandolin. They're the best. I use it for like everything. All right, so we have all of our onions in the bowl. Then the next step is to take some buttermilk and to drizzle the buttermilk right over the onions. And you're gonna let these sit for about 20 minutes or so. And the reason being is that you want the buttermilk to absorb in the onions, and it's gonna flavor the onions, and it's also going to allow the flour to stick to the onions when you bread them so that you can fry them. It's really, really an awesome trick. You can also use milk if you want, but I find that buttermilk is the best. It has a nicer flavor. So while our onions are chilling in the buttermilk, we're going to get working on our cabbage here. We have some beautiful red cabbage. It's basically the same thing as green cabbage. It might have a sweeter taste, a little bit more of a delicate taste. But to me, I mean, how could you not love cabbage that's this color? It's just so amazing and vibrant and fantastic. So, guess what I'm gonna use again? I'm gonna use my mandolin. You don't need to use a mandolin again. You can just use a sharp knife, but the mandolin will make things so much faster. So I cut my cabbage in half already and I cored it, which means I take out that big white chunk that was kind of in the center of the cabbage, that's the stem. So after you do that, then you're gonna wanna cut it in half one more time. Take the quarter and take your mandolin and you're just going to shave it again. So I'm finding a nice little place to rest my safety here. And I'm going to go ahead and thinly slice the quarter. I'm gonna do that for all the quarters until we have all of our shredded cabbage. Cabbage break. Look at this. It kind of looks like an Easter basket, like the stuff in an Easter basket, doesn't it? So we're all shredded. I clearly need to do some cleaning up here. And after I clean up, the onions will be ready. So our onions have been soaking in the buttermilk for about 20 minutes or so. And it's time to take them out of the buttermilk and to coat them in flour so we can fry them and they'll be nice and crispy and fabulous. So I'm going to take handfuls of the onions here. I'm gonna place it on a plate. I'm doing this just to kind of drain the excess buttermilk out of the onions. And that way we're not doing this kind of in the goopy stuff on the bottom of this. And then I'm going to take flour here. I just have all-purpose flour. You can also use gluten-free flour if you prefer. And I'm gonna start with about half of this or so. And I'm just going to toss these lightly in the flour just to coat them completely. I use about the same ratio as buttermilk to flour. I find that to be about perfect. And you can do this in a bowl, but I actually find that doing this on a plate is a little bit easier just because you can spread the onions out and see what you've done. So I'm going to grab this, add the rest of my flour, and then keep tossing. Okay, so we're gonna head on over to the stove. I might stop crying from the onions at some point. And we're gonna get these frying. Let's go. Okay, so we're about to make our crispy fried onions, and I'm so excited to munch on these while I'm making them. It's the best part of making this cabbage salad. Okay, so I have some vegetable oil here in a glass, which is, I know, kind of weird. I also have a medium skillet, and I'm just gonna pour the vegetable oil in our skillet. You want at least a ½ inch of oil in your pan. So it really depends on how big your pan is to know how much oil to put in. If you don't put at least ½ inch, the onions are going to stick to the bottom of your pan and you're gonna have burned onions. So I would say about ½ inch to 3/4 inch of oil is perfect. Some people even say an inch or so. All right, so I'm going to turn our burner on. I'm gonna turn it to about medium-high heat or so, and you're going to want to use a meat thermometer to measure the temperature of the oil. You want the oil to be about 325 to 375, somewhere in there. You don't want the oil to be really, really hot because then your onions will burn. The crispiness will just turn to burnness. And you don't want it to be too cold because then you won't be able to fry your onions. So we're going to monitor this. When it reaches about 325, we're gonna pop our onions in. Perfect. Our oil has reached 325. So you're gonna wanna make sure to try to maintain that temperature as best as possible. I find medium-high heat is about perfect, so that way you don't need to continuously keep, changing the oil temperature and testing it. So I have our onions here. You're going to want to take some of your onions, you want to try to separate them as best as possible so they don't go in as a big blob. And you're just going to place your onions right in the hot oil. And don't put in a ton, you don't want to crowd the pan, you want to start with about that amount. And you're just going to let them fry for about 2 to 5 minutes or so until they're the golden brown that you like. I like kind of like a light golden brown, and you want to flip them about halfway through. It depends on how hot your oil is, how long it'll take to cook. So we're gonna flip them. They're starting to get nice and golden brown. It's exactly what we want. So it looks like this guy here is done. The other ones need a little bit more time. So you're gonna give it a nice shake just to get all that extra oil off. And then you're gonna take a plate that has a paper towel on it, and you're just going to stick that guy right there to drain and cool. And you wanna make sure to put a generous amount of salt on either side. The salt just makes it. Look! Eric and I have been snacking on these while I was making them because they're just so good hot. This is about 1/3 of the onion that we cut and breaded. I'm gonna be making the entire batch because I like these on literally everything, but it's up to you if you wanna make such a big batch. So I'm gonna set this aside and let's get started on our vinaigrette. And this is going to dress our cabbage. So it's super simple. All I have here is one very large shallot that I cut up into rings. And all you have to do to cut this into rings is you're just gonna peel the shallot, and then you're just going to rest it on the cutting board and you're just gonna slice it. And that's why they're round like this. I'm gonna pop these in. Then I have some olive oil here. Gonna add that right in, and then it's a vinaigrette. So obviously there's vinegar. I have sherry wine vinegar here, which I love because it's not quite as assertive as a red wine vinegar is, or even a balsamic. It's a little bit more mellow and rich in flavor, and it's perfect for this. It's just so yummy. But you can also sub red wine vinegar. And then I'm gonna add quite a bit of pepper here, and then just a little bit of salt. Perfect. So I'm going to start my burner about medium-high heat or so, and you're gonna let the shallots cook off a bit for about 3 minutes or so, just so they're not so intense and they absorb the vinegar a little bit. Our shallots have softened. Look how perfect this is. Yum! I can't wait to pour this over our cabbage. Let's go. So everything's all set to go. We have our shaved cabbage, we have our amazing vinaigrette, and then we have, the best of all, our crispy fried onions to put on top. So I'm gonna show you how to do this. This is still really piping hot. I'm going to pour it right over our cabbage. Perfect. I'm gonna get all the little scraps. Every little piece counts. And then I'm gonna take some salad spoons, and I'm just going to toss the salad, and the cabbage is just gonna wilt ever so slightly, and that's what makes it so good. So I've tossed this up, and I'm just gonna add a tad more sherry vinegar. I like to do this at the end just because sometimes the shallots actually absorb a lot of that vinegar when you're cooking off the vinaigrette. So I'm just gonna give it a final toss, and it's time to plate. So everything's nice and combined. It's slightly warm. You can see that the cabbage has wilted just a tiny bit. It's amazing. But what makes it more amazing is this. I love adding the fried onions to the top, because then they don't get all soggy. It's perfect. And then when you serve it, you can just serve it like this, and that way the onions will stay on the top. And of course, I want more than that. Let's try. Fork is ready. Mouth is ready too. All right, gotta get an onion in there. It's gonna be a messy bite. The sherry wine comes through, but it's not in your face crazy. Nice pop of acid. The shallots really absorb the vinegar, so it's almost like a pickled onion. And then the crispiness of the fried onions on the top bring it all together. Check it out on tastefullygrace.com. You won't regret it.